Welcome to our channel, where we bring the most bone-chilling stories from the depths of Reddit's darkest corners. Join us as we explore the eerie tales that keep you up at night. If you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notifications to never miss a spine-tingling story. Mr. Wexler, we need to take you into protective custody. Whoever is doing this to you has now made a physical attempt on your life, Detective Monkhouse said to me as he, once again, sat at my kitchen table. The entire street outside my house looked like a murder had just been committed, with how many cop cars stood on the curb, some with their lights still flashing. The entire cavalry had been called in once the two officers had seen the contents of the new envelope, and along with them had come the detective. I sat and stared at him. For how long? I asked him. How long would I need to, whatever protective custody means, disappear, go away, whatever? For as long as is needed, until we can get a positive ID on these people, he replied. What about my job? My house? He looked around. We'd let your company know you'd be out indefinitely due to police business. And as for your house, we'd have someone watching it, just in case they came by here. I turned the thought over in my head. Being locked away in some safe house didn't exactly sound the most appealing to me. But then again, neither did another repeat of the events of the past few months. You don't really have a choice, Jared. I sighed. Okay, when would this happen? He nodded, seeming a bit more relaxed now that I'd agreed with his plan. Well, we need to get a safe house sorted for you, somewhere off the grid. We'll have to use encrypted channels to minimize the chance of the location being given away, I'd say. He looked up at the ceiling. I'd say tomorrow, by the latest. I nodded again as he stood up. In the meantime, prepare a suitcase or two of your belongings to take with you. I'll have 2 squad cars parked out front and a 3rd in the back. If you decide to go anywhere today, let them know. I stood up and shook his hand. I actually probably will go somewhere today, Detective. I'm going to go to the bank to withdraw some money from my account to prepay at least the next few months of rent, as well as a few things I need if you're taking me tomorrow. He nodded. We already have your bank location, so we'll keep an eye out for you there. Where are you going to go for the items you need? I didn't hesitate. The mall. There's a branch of my bank in it, so I can get both things done at the same time. I don't trust going to a place right now that might be empty. In fact, I raised my wrist and looked at the watch on my wrist. I'll go to the mall now. He nodded again. Just don't take too long, he said. Here at the house will be the safest place you can possibly be right now. I agreed. Then, after he let the officers know I was leaving, we both exited my house. As I unlocked the door to the Ford, I spared a glance at him as he stood next to his unmarked cruiser. He was staring at me, and after an uncomfortable moment, I nodded at him and slid behind the wheel. I backed the car out, still having to get used to turning and looking out the back window instead of looking at a rear-view camera, then began my drive to the mall. As I stopped at a red light, I heard my flip phone begin to ring. Looking around for a moment, I pulled it from my pocket, half afraid I'd see no number displayed on the caller ID. Instead, I saw Vivian's name displayed. Still feeling wary, after having seen Davin's name on my Cadillac's screen, I flipped it open and crooked the phone in my elbow as the light turned green. Hello? I said slowly. Thankfully, I immediately received an answer. Jared, are you okay? She asked. You haven't been into work in weeks, and Harold in the mailroom just told me he saw squad cars galore in front of your place earlier. The paranoid sensation I'd had when I'd seen her at the hospital returned, but at the same time, it felt so damn lonely to not be able to trust anyone. In the end, it won out over caution. No, not really, I admitted. You have a lunch break soon? Yeah, she said, as I cruised down one of the main streets. I have mine in 10 minutes, why? I took a deep breath. Meet me at the coffee shop in the mall on the 1st floor by the bank in 20 minutes. I'll tell you what's happening when I see you. I heard her begin to answer me, but it was suddenly drowned out by the sounds of chaos in front of me. I snapped my head up to see I was about to drive straight into the beginnings of a massive pile up in the next intersection, not even 20 feet in front of me. Shit! I shouted, dropping the phone and slamming my foot hard on the brake pedal. I heard the rear wheels lock up and the car began to skid. For a few terrifying moments, I thought I'd slide straight into the hell of screaming metal and tires, which was still at a crescendo. Then, it finally came to a halt. My knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel so tightly, and I fought to get my breathing under control and my heart to stop pounding. Very faintly, I could hear Vivian's frantic voice calling for me from my phone, which had fallen into the driver's footwell. I reached down and snatched it up. "Jared, what's going on?" she yelled. "Viv, I've got to go. There's been a horrible accident," I said. "Just get to the mall. I'll be there soon." I flipped the phone closed before she had a chance to reply, put the car in park, and jumped out. I felt sick to my stomach as I surveyed the carnage in front of me. At least 5 or 6 cars had been involved, all entangling with one another in a haphazard mess of torn metal and broken glass. A small, detached part of my mind realized it looked somewhat like a twisted modern art exhibit, except for the people. Several of them were still in their cars. I saw people from the sidewalks running over to help the people in the cars, while another dialed 911. The driver of a Mercedes in the middle looked to be unconscious, while an older gentleman stumbled out of his wrecked Honda, screaming at a dazed woman who stood next to her minivan. "Lady, are you out of your fucking mind?" he shouted. "The light for me was green and you ran the red. Are you nuts?" The lady looked incredulously at him. "Are you nuts, sir? The light was green for me, which means it had to be red for you. Are you blind or something?" They continued to argue, but their voices faded away from my ears. I wasn't listening anymore. A severe chill had shot up my spine. They both thought they had green lights. Stepping away from my car, I moved just enough to see the street lights hanging over the intersection, and felt another shiver shoot through me as my fear was confirmed. Every light was green, all 4 ways. They stayed green, never changing back to yellow or red. In any other circumstance, I would have written it off to a major glitch in the system, but my mind refused to let me think it, especially as I gazed up and saw the traffic cameras mounted on top of the streetlights. One had been pointed directly where I'd been coming from. I felt a new sense of horror sweep through me as I realized the accident had been caused deliberately, with the intent of having me drive straight into it. Hearing the sounds of sirens wailing in the distance, I decided not to stick around, and instead walked quickly back to my car. Doing a U-turn, I looked in the rearview mirror at the accident. Everyone was rushing to help the wrecked victims. Everybody except one person, what looked like a man with a baseball cap pulled down over his eyes, which shielded his face from view. He was watching me drive away. Took the side roads to the mall in perhaps too much of a hurry, constantly glancing in my rear view and side mirror while thinking I was about to see a car appear behind me. Thankfully, one never did, and I made it to the mall without any other incident. I parked in the middle of the most crowded area, stepping out and hearing the familiar sounds of children screaming at their parents, along with teenagers laughing. I felt a double-edged sword of emotions, part relieved at the massive amounts of people I saw milling around, and unwillingly, and especially after seeing the man at the accident staring at me, increasingly paranoid. I glanced at my watch. Vivian would be arriving in 10 to 15 minutes, which gave me just enough time to get the items I needed and get my money out of the bank. I strode inside, hearing a comforting song from the 80s playing over the ceiling-mounted speakers as I made my way to the various stores. However, the comforting feeling died away as I watched the cashier in the first store run my credit card. "I'm sorry, sir, but your credit card was declined," she informed me, handing it back. "What?" I breathed. I'd always paid my bills for my card. It had never once been declined. I froze. They did this. I don't know how they got into my credit card account, but they did something. That thought was followed by another, one which sent a surge of panic through me. Very quickly, I paid for my items with some of the little cash I had on me, then left the store, heading quickly for the bank. No, please, for the love of God, no. I almost jogged into the bank and got in line. When I was called up to the teller, I gave her my bank card and asked her to check my account balance. She stared at her computer screen for a moment, then looked up at me. "Sir, You withdrew all your money and closed this bank account this morning." I felt the blood drain from my face at her words. I'd had almost $3,000 in that account, and someone had gotten into it, taken all the money out, then closed it. Not somebody, Jared, I thought. You know exactly who. "What about my alternate account?" I asked desperately. I had a safety egg account for emergencies, one which I'd put almost $19,000 into, just in case I'd ever lost my job or fallen ill. Nobody else knew about it other than me and the bank. After a moment of checking, she looked back at me. "According to this, you did the same thing with that account as well, sir," she said, looking at me strangely. I couldn't say anything. All ability to speak felt as though it had drained out of me, leaving me as empty as my bank accounts. It was all gone. They'd hacked into my bank accounts and taken all my money. I heard the teller ask me something, but I wasn't paying attention. I just turned and slowly walked out of the bank, feeling a sense of hopelessness wash over me. They knew my exact weak spots, and they used the technology against me like they were wielding a sword. I was so lost in my thoughts, I almost didn't hear my name being called. "Jared!" I finally looked up. Vivian stood across the main hall from me, sitting at a table in front of the coffee shop. She held 2 coffees in her hands and gestured for me to come over. The sight of her, standing there and having been kind enough to buy me a coffee, almost sent me into tears. Instead, I forced them back and crossed over to her. I did drop my shopping bags, then did something I didn't normally do. I hugged her hard. She gasped in surprise at the gesture of affection. While she had hugged me before more than a few times, I'm not someone who's into physical displays of affection for friends, family, or anyone. This was the first time I'd ever hugged her back, and after a moment's hesitation, she embraced me as well. The lavender scent of her shampoo was comforting, in a way. After a moment, we let go, and I slowly sat down opposite her. "Okay, now I know something bad's happened to you, if you're doing that," she said softly. "Viv, you don't even know the half of it," I said, putting my face in my hands. "Then tell me," she insisted, reaching across the table and gripping my hand. I shook my head. "I don't even know where to start," I admitted. She tilted her head. "Just start at the beginning and tell me everything," she said gently. I hesitated for a moment. I still didn't know if I trusted her. Even though I'd secretly harbored a crush on her for the last 3 years, the feeling of being unable to trust anyone remained deep in me. Just like before, though, the need to tell someone won out over caution. I sighed. "All right," I said, and then, for the next half an hour, I told her everything that had happened. About the threatening texts, to the envelopes delivered to me with the messages and pictures, to the hacking of my car, which had almost killed me, and finally ended with what had just happened with my bank and credit card. When I mentioned Davin might be involved, due to the coincidence with the car incident and his disappearance, I saw her grow even more uncomfortable and shocked than she'd already become. I leaned forward and picked up my coffee, taking a large swig of the now lukewarm drink. "But why are they doing this to you?" she finally asked, after a long stretch of silence. I shook my head. I'd asked myself that same question 1,000,000 times now. "I wish I knew, Viv," I said. "I've thought back my whole life, even to my childhood, to think if I might have pissed off or wronged someone somehow. I can't think of anyone. I've always been nice to people." I put my head in my hands again. Another silence. "But I just can't see Davin as part of this," she said. I couldn't either, but I also couldn't deny the facts staring at me in the face. I looked at her. "You honestly probably won't be seeing me for a while. The cops are going to put me somewhere safe until they can get a lead on who these people are." At this, she gave me a look of sadness, and I realized how much she'd enjoyed working with me. The thought made me feel a tiny bit better. She nodded. "Try and let me know you're okay when you can. Please?" she asked, and I nodded at her. "I promise I'll try to as soon as I can." She stood up finally, and I mirrored her move. I walked close to her, enough I could talk low without being heard. "Just please watch yourself, okay? I don't think you'll get sucked into this, but if you ever think you are, call the cops, okay?" She gave me a look of concern, then nodded. "I will." She gave me a hug, then left, leaving me alone among the strangers. I still had a few items to purchase, and I thanked God that I'd taken a few $100s out of my now-closed bank account a few days ago. I grabbed the bag I'd already bought and walked to the escalator to the second floor. Getting behind a mother with her two small children, I leaned against the railing as I began the long ride up. As it reached the halfway point, the mall's PA system chimed, a woman's voice speaking a moment later. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've been asked to play a specific song on our speakers and make a dedication as well. This song goes out to JW." I felt myself go still as a statue. JW, Jared Wexler. My name. "Oh, hell," I whispered. A moment later, the song began, and if I felt afraid just by the dedication, the song made me feel as though I'd had a bucket of ice water dunked over my head. It was "Every Breath You Take" by The Police, and if you know that song, you know exactly why the first few lyrics made my heart begin to pound like a war drum. Okay, screw getting anything else. Get out of here. That's what my mind screamed at me, and I listened. As soon as I reached the top of the escalator, I broke free from the crowd and sprinted back down the neighboring stairs, taking them two at a time. As I dashed through the mall towards the exit with curious eyes glancing up at me running by, my eyes caught glimpses of things I couldn't possibly be seeing. I swore I saw the same man in the baseball cap staring down at me from the second story of the mall. I swore I saw a young woman aiming her smartphone at me. I swore I saw every security camera in the main hall turn to follow me, and the flat-screen TVs in the electronics store displaying videos of me from them running. And I swear that I saw another man, this one wearing a hoodie with the hood up and obscuring the top half of his face, flash me a grin as I broke through the doors to the outside. All the while accompanied by that damn song. I sprinted through the parking lot for my car, not stopping until I practically slammed myself into the side of it. I felt like I was having a panic attack, my breathing labored and unable to calm down. I just stood there for the longest time, fighting to get a hold of myself. Finally, I felt myself begin to calm down, and I unlocked the car door and slid behind the wheel. As I dropped my bags in the back seat, I heard my flip phone begin to ring. I pulled it out and felt my breathing begin to hitch in my throat again as I saw no caller ID displayed. "It's them." I didn't answer it. I just kept staring at the phone until it stopped ringing. A moment later, it vibrated, giving the notification that I'd received a new voicemail. After a moment's hesitation, I flipped it open and went to it. After clicking through the options, I heard a familiar masked voice speak through the phone. "Well, that's a bit rude to send me straight to voicemail, Jared, but I guess I can understand." The person laughed. "I hoped you enjoyed your run through the mall. It was beyond entertaining to see your reaction to our dedication." So there was more than one person behind this. The voice continued, seeming cheerful. "But the best part about everything is, beyond the accident, or should I say, both accidents, we haven't even gotten to the real fun yet, which reminds me, thanks for the financial donation to help us prepare your surprise. You're a real pal." I wanted to scream and hurl my phone away, but kept listening. "So keep an eye out for us. We'll be seeing you, this time in person, very soon." They laughed again, then, like they did before, turned deadly serious. "And don't try and escape, because there's nowhere on earth we can't find you. Not with all the cameras and technology everywhere now." The voice shifted back to its happy, taunting tone. "See ya." And with that, the voicemail ended. I ended the call, and in a panic, fumbled to bring up Detective Monkhouse's number. He needs to know what just happened. But as I scrolled through my contacts list, the phone suddenly began to ring again. I almost flung it away from me until I saw the caller ID displayed. It was the detective's name and number. Thank God, I thought, then quickly hit answer. "Detective, something's happened here!" I almost shouted into the phone. On the other end, I heard a commotion brewing. A moment later, I heard Detective Monkhouse's voice speak. "Fuck! They're coming at us both then!" he said, the venom audible in his voice. I froze. What do you mean?" I stammered out. "They somehow got the drop on some of our uniformed officers here. One is dead, and the other 3 are missing." I slumped back in the seat. They had literally managed to successfully attack 4 trained cops. "What chance did I have?" The detective continued. "What happened on your end?" he asked. Quickly, I relayed to him the events of the last few hours, leaving out speaking to Vivian. I now believed she wasn't a part of this, and didn't want to bring her into the line of fire any more than I already had. When I finished, I heard the detective curse. "Look, we have to move up the schedule for getting you to the safe house," he said, "but I'm going to need you to drive yourself to the rendezvous point with me. I'm going to have to stick around here for a while to help clean up this mess. Do you have a pen and paper to write down directions?" I did, pulling a small notepad and pencil out from the glove box, quickly scribbling down the directions he gave me. "And one more thing," he added when I told him I'd gotten them. "Get rid of that flip phone. I didn't think before, but they can still likely triangulate your position through the cell towers." As he said it, I felt like hitting myself in the head for not remembering every cell phone, including the old flip phones, could be tracked. "Okay," was all I could say. "Then get going," he finished with, before hanging up. I sat for a moment longer, staring out at the windshield, back towards the mall entrance. I thought I could see a bit of movement in one of the windows to the side, as though someone were staring out into the parking lot. Forcing myself to look away, I looked down as I popped the back of the phone open, ripping out the battery before twisting both sections of the phone apart, breaking it. I rolled down my window and dumped the pieces onto the pavement before starting the car and backing out of the space. I drove out of the lot, stopping only for a moment to completely fill the tank and purchase a paper map from a gas station, and then began the long drive to where the detective had asked me to meet him. I kept away from the highways and main roads, knowing they'd likely all have traffic cameras on them, which could track me easily, instead taking the much longer but safer back roads. The miles crept by as the hours passed, the sun getting low in the sky. I stopped one more time to fill up the tank again, grabbing a gas station hot dog and a bag of chips for dinner before continuing. It was almost 10 at night by the time I reached the approximate area where the directions had led me. I was far out in farm country, having passed by darkened farmhouse after darkened farmhouse for the last 2.5 hours. All of them must be fast asleep already, getting rest for the long day tomorrow. For some reason, the thought of such a simple life, and especially one so low-tech, comforted me. I decided, if I made it out of this, I'd give some serious thought to ditching city life and coming out to a place like this for a much quieter and much more remote life. The sign for the road I was instructed to take came, and I turned right onto a dirt driveway. The old Ford rattled and squeaked as it made its way up the drive towards another darkened farmhouse. I could see the outline of a grain silo and barn out in the accompanying field. As I got closer to the house, I spied what looked like an unmarked police cruiser, an older-style Crown Vic parked next to the house. The detective's already here, thank you God, I thought. I pulled up behind it and shut the engine off, the headlights shutting off and plunging me into darkness. The silence, for someone who lived most of his life in the city, felt eerie. All I could hear through the glass was the whipping of the wind and the call of some owl or other bird somewhere in the forest beyond the farm. He must be waiting for me in his car, I thought, and twisted the door open. The night air was chilly, rewarding me with the stink of manure from the neighboring properties. Shutting the door quietly, I moved towards the darkened shape of the cruiser in front of me. I'd gotten about halfway when I stopped dead. Something went through my mind. The police in my city stopped using Crown Vics 3 years ago. Worse still, was remembering that the car Detective Monkhouse had stood next to earlier today hadn't been a Vic. It had been a Dodge Charger. "Fuck," I whispered, suddenly feeling very vulnerable. Jigsaw puzzle pieces came together in my head. It was a fucking setup. They somehow mimicked the detective's voice. They made me get rid of the only way to contact or find me, then had me drive out to the middle of nowhere. Suddenly, every snap of a twig sounded like someone moving towards me in the dark. Every gust of wind sounded like someone breathing. My head swiveled around like an owl, though I could barely see anything. Fuck this, I'm out of here. I turned and hurried back to my car, pulling open the door and practically leaping into the driver's seat. I started the engine and turned the headlights on when a sound made the biggest chill I ever felt run up my spine. It's a sound that even now, almost a year since that night, still causes me to wake up in the middle of the night, covered in a waterfall of sweat. It was the sound of someone breathing softly, coming from behind me, from the back seat. Welcome to the party, Jared, I heard a man's deep voice say behind me. I was suddenly grabbed from behind as I tried to kick open the driver's door, and I felt a rag of some kind forced over my mouth. I struggled for a moment, my muffled screams sounding muted in the car's interior, and then everything went black.